Okay, good morning. Welcome to part three of this one. And this is all just designed to continually walk you through this same poem by Max Ritvo from Four Reincarnations as a way to think about how to approach it in other poems. And I'll do, as I said early on, that I will do a poem from each section, excuse me, poem from each section, and I can adjust what I talk about with those poems based on, if you have any comments or questions about how to move forward. Remember that what we're building to here is a way to talk about this book as a whole in the theoretical research paper. In other words, the paper is theoretical and it's not going to happen, as I think almost everybody noted in your response journals. So with that said, we're just trying to build up a way to potentially talk about this book and to bring in ideas that we have and that we can think about. And I'm just going to try to interact with the poem into these videos and show you how research can happen and where we can start following up on that one. I can also happily go into looking at research for you in real time, so I can try to Google things basically and show you what that looks like. If that's interesting, send me an email, let me know, and I will absolutely go through that process for you. But I want to jump right back into the poem. So it's been 20 minutes, 2 videos, and we've covered these 2 lines. So I don't doubt like a lot of you hate so far what's going on, but hopefully you don't. So he's setting us up for surprise with "The bed is on fire and are you laughing?" I have a relationship poem. I'm not entirely sure what their relationship is at the moment, because this is a strange reaction, as well as, so is all of this. And also my speaker hasn't done anything else. So action versus inaction could be interesting to think about with the book. That's just what I'm writing down. You leave the bed. Okay, so we're back to the bed and you. So you leave the bed. So it sounds like they were in the bed to begin with, you. So I'm thinking now this is probably a little bit more metaphorical, but also it could be, like a small little, I don't know, if your lighter fell down or something. You leave the bed and leave me without thought. Okay, so this seems like a pretty simple sentence to me. It's a sentence, it's one stanza. The repetition of the word leave, pretty much mirroring one another within the sentences, definitely feels like there's a lot of distance now that I've already seen set up here with "Are you laughing?" And the distance there with "Are you laughing?" to me is both the laughing element of this, the sound that the you makes, but the fact that the speaker doesn't know if that's the laughter of the you. So there's the distance of just knowledge, right? There's a distance of action, and then like what that action means to us. And then of course there's the doubling up of distance by the third line. And there's more distance here, right? Because when the you leaves, you leave the bed, right? Then and leave me. So there's a very specific set, right? It's not just I'm just getting away from the bed, I'm getting away from the person in the bed. And then leaving them without thought. So it seems like this is, to me, I would read this as almost the you left without even thinking about the me, okay, without thought. I think there's also a reading of this one to me when I hear this. It sounds like it leaves the me character here without thought. In other words, they have gone to some sort of void, right? Some sort of existential no thought space, which that's just the way I'm reading that sentence right now. And so I'm putting a lot of pressure onto that to make this next associative leap, but it sounds something close to like zazen or meditation, something that about leaving without thought. Like, in other words, I don't think that has to be a negative image. This right here, I think it can be read negatively, but I don't think it's necessarily 100% that. And I think it might take me in some interesting places. If I look at some like Zen Buddhism, maybe I could think about Buddhist psychology, because we are talking about 4 reincarnations. So there's a real connection back to that as well. So what is negative, what isn't, right? What is and what isn't? I think that's a good idea to think about, especially because the third word of the whole book is, well, I mean, technically, the 6th word is. So to be, right? To be present. So maybe that's something that could be really fun to think about. And now I can maybe read the poem a little bit like that. So you leave the bed and leave me without thought. Okay, fair enough. So people are just kind of doing stuff. There's just action. This is all about inaction. This is action. The springs want to embrace each other, but they're afraid if they break, their spiral, they will never be able to hold anyone. So, 4 lines, 2 stanzas, 1 sentence. So a much more complicated poem moment here than what we've seen before, right? Before it's been the first 2 stanzas are just like, sentence, sentence, very simple, but I think there's a little playfulness in this one. Whereas this really moves us to another space. We can think about line and image in this one, and how stanza works. So the springs want to embrace each other. So already we're back to this idea of the bed is on fire. What I mean by that is, like, but first of all, we're back in the image of the bed, but we've gone deeper, right? We're now inside of the bed. Whereas in the first one, we were just the top. So, or it's sort of like more of the whole, like the holistic element, the image of the bed. But now we're looking at the springs. The springs, of course, are the structure, the foundation, the purpose of this bed, right, to support you, right, to keep you supported throughout the night, or whenever you sleep. But now we're also, they have desire, well, which is, of course, well, maybe I don't want to say of course, but like, it doesn't seem like that's true, that they have desire, or we don't typically think of them as inanimate objects occupying a space where desire. They simply are what they do, right? That's what they are. They're present. So if they want to embrace each other, right, to tangle all together, then that's not really them. That's on the speaker, right? The speaker has this moment of imagination. Now the speaker doesn't say, I'm imagining that the springs want to embrace each other. He's not giving us all of that. He's just starting right at where, like, the imaginative process begins. So he's using his imagination here. And kind of goes back up to this line here, without thought, which seems interesting because, without thought, the thought that happens next is this, I think you could call it, it wouldn't be the pathetic fallacy, because I think that's just specifically for nature. When you look into nature and attribute your own emotional well-being or whatever emotional reality to nature. So like, today's bright and sunny, so it feels like, oh, it's a beautiful day because I feel great. That's not true. So it's just more that like, nature is what nature is and you are what you are. So that's not exactly what this is, but it's close to that. It definitely kind of personifies these to give them want. I think we could just call it personification, which seems fine. So I'm gonna write that down as well. So the springs want to embrace each other. So this is our first real moment of domesticity, I would say, of intimacy, right? Is embracing and wanting. These are 2 positive words when we think about relationships, right? Desire and intimacy, and physical intimacy. But it's in the springs, these metal coils. So the springs want to embrace each other. Okay, line break. But so the line break is very much operating the way the sentence is right now. So it pauses, right? The springs want to embrace each other. There's no comma, but it pauses naturally. But they're afraid if they break. Okay, so now we're moving into fear, right? Thinking, and now it's our speaker, remember, thinking about wanting to be able to embrace, wanting this space with this, but they're afraid if they break their spiral. Okay, so which is what a coil is. It's also I don't know, this is probably way much of a stretch, but it's like half of the double helix, right? Sort of like the DNA of the bed, maybe. That's oof. I'm gonna write that down. That might be too much of a stretch. I don't know if I can own that or not, but I'll look. So right, so they're afraid if they break. So now we have fear, but they're afraid if they break. So the break is strange right there, because I don't see break earlier inside of the image we have. The springs want to embrace each other, but they're afraid if they break. So that's a separation. Again, that's a distance from what I'm expecting. Stanza breaks, it's a little bit harsher here. Their spiral. So, it's not straight in their spiral, right? It's not, the idea is that to touch one another, right, to fulfill that desire, that the springs feel that they would have to break their own spirals. And if that happens, if they break what they fundamentally are, what they fundamentally consist of, right, their identities, if they break that, then that will mean that they have no more function, and their function is to hold someone up, to hold whatever up, but hold them up. So the image is very much, I think, an image, a personification of this sort of the DNA of the bed, which is definitely not going to hold up. But anyway, so that this is going to be an image of desire, unfulfillable desire, where if one completes the desire that they have, it will fundamentally change the nature of the self. If I do this, I will no longer be what I am. Okay, if I complete this, which is what I want, I will no longer be what I am. And if that happens, if I can't be who I am, then I don't know how I will love anyone. Right? I don't know how I can do that. So it's a really complicated idea. It's a really complicated image. And again, it's not being handed to you. And that's my read of this one, right? This kind of loneliness and this fear that's connected to desire, that's really just basically human desire that he's needing to put onto this incredibly inanimate object. So it's very much, I think, again, like distancing the self of putting away what he wants to say, and giving it to something inanimate and making it somehow a little less dramatic, a little bit less, I don't know, vulnerable, I guess would be the word. I think like vulnerable would be the nicest way to say that. And I think where I'll end on this video is there, but the next thing I want to mention about research is, as I read this book, when I think about argumentation and I think about its purpose, I feel a lot of vulnerability, especially in the second section, where he's and the rest of the book too. But as many of you pointed out, like that's a much more uncomfortable section than section one, very much about the body, very much about sex, and sort of that confusion that he has in that space. But I think this has to do with, again, a kind of vulnerability. Remember that the very last line of Black Bulls, right, which I asked you about in that quiz. My apologies. I should have it queued up. I am so sorry that you have come to this mind of mine. I think this is very much a disclaimer for vulnerability. And vulnerability is a fascinating topic to research. And I just know that just from having taught different humanities courses, but there's a lot of work out there about vulnerability. I think, I'm going to forget who did it. I want to say Brene Brown has one on vulnerability, a TED Talk, which is a great source. So, right now I have a lot of different research just from going through the first half of the poem, vulnerability to Zazen and Zen Buddhist philosophy, to looking at unsettlingness as a kind of conscious awareness, DNA of the bed. So there's a lot that we can do just by paying close attention. So that's where I'll end this one. So you're welcome to follow up on any of the research components that I've mentioned, if that's something that you're interested in. So feel free to do that for your top proposal and everything else as you go forward. But other than that, I will try and finish up this poem in the next video. Okay, thank you. Bye now.